They wanted me to become a doctor, which I didn't do. I did all the things where I took the test and everything, and I was literally in the last round of doing it when I realized that I actually hated science. And there are other reasons that you get, whether it's feedback, whether it's quote unquote failures, whether there's all these things that happen, but because the more that you grow and the more that you experience, the more opportunity there is to do that, which is great because that's just part of being human, which is what I love about this journey that we're on.
I'm going to be a bit unfair now. I'm going to ask you a question I've never asked, I guess, before, but it's just come to me now because it's really interesting. It links to, I guess, your earlier life as well and what it is you've been doing so far into this entrepreneurial journey. But let's say in the next few years, Capsho has been very successful. It's done what it's there to do, and you just feel that it's time for you to go on to the next stage of your adventure in your life. What do you think you might spend a lot of the rest of your life doing?
You know, if you do have something burning inside of you and you have a great idea that you need to flesh out and test and, you know, all of that, like you're always going to be held back if you let yourself be held back.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Deirdre Tshien has joined me on the show today. Deirdre, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Andrew. I am going to be honest, I don't know if I feel quite equipped to be on a successful leader podcast, but I'm really super honored to be here.
No, and we both know I'm a customer of yours, a happy customer of yours, and I know we've been through a lot together the last couple of years. That may come up later. So as far as I'm concerned, you've got great success to talk about both now and in your earlier career. So let's start by the audience getting to know you a little bit and tell us a bit about you personally and professionally and what your focus is right now.
Yeah, so my name's Deirdre Tshien. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a software called Capsho. It is an AI-powered software. We help entrepreneurs who podcast, YouTube, live stream. Basically, they create some form of long-form audio or video content. We help them take that and create even more content marketing assets. And really, our whole focus in doing that is to help them create marketing assets that designed to get them more leads and more clients. So that's kind of our number one focus, because if our Capshovians can succeed, then we know that we're succeeding.
Great. And what about personally? What do you do when you're not doing that?
Yes. I feel like I have a minor form of ADHD where I try a lot of different things. I love being active. So, you know, right now we've been playing a lot of pickleball, but we're starting to get into some dance. I walk all the time with my puppy. So we go hiking a lot. So really it's things that are around activity. I also do like reading. So, I mean, it feels like I'm either 0 to 100. Like I'm either like really moving or I'm like prone in bed reading. So that's generally what you can find me doing.
Super. And tell us about your puppy, because I love dogs. Tell us about your puppy.
Yes. So he's a mini Australian Shepherd. So you can probably tell from my accent that I am Aussie. So I grew up in Australia. I did not know that there was a breed that was an Australian Shepherd, because that's not an Australian dog. It was only when I've been over here in the States that it's become like, you know, they breed them in the States. But we actually didn't, when we got him at the beginning of this year. We didn't plan on getting a puppy. We kind of just stumbled into it, but he's been such a great addition to the family, and we couldn't imagine life without him. So he's been awesome.
Oh, great. Well, there's a good link there to families. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, how your environment as you were growing up shaped your early leadership style. That's interesting to hear.
Yeah, gosh. A little bit about my childhood. So if you're watching this, because if you're listening, you might not be able to tell, but I am Asian by way of ethnicity and background. And, you know, anyone who knows, my parents were first migrants into Australia from Malaysia, actually. And, you know, it's very much a first migrant and children of first migrants is, we're pushed to succeed because that's pretty much the whole reason why they've moved, to give their kids, us, better opportunities, and therefore a better life. And so, my childhood was very much about studying. It was a very academic focused. My parents wanted me to get into, a really good, in Sydney, there's a concept of selective schools. So you have to take a test to get into that. They wanted me to become a doctor, which I didn't do. I did all the things where I took the test and everything. And I was like literally in the last round of doing it when I realized that I actually hated science. and that's pretty fundamental if you want to become a doctor. And so, it was very much, my childhood was very much geared towards, it was all about academics. It was very much about head down, be seen, not heard. I was not encouraged to ask why I was not encouraged to ask a lot of questions. I felt a lot of times, and I found this even in my 20s when I went into corporate and stuff, was that I was conditioned to almost like not take up space, if that makes sense. So that I feel like really impacted, I think even, I know we're talking about leadership, but like a lot of like my younger corporate career, I guess, was impacted by the fact that a lot of times I would actually be talking to my boss or my boss's boss or my mentors, and consistently when I was asking for feedback, the one thing that they said was like, we want to hear your opinions, we want to hear what you think. And I was just not ever accustomed to sharing that. I always just thought, well, like I think there was a part of me that just always thought that, well, if no one else is saying it, then it must already be known, or, like what I have to share or contribute isn't something that is going to be different, or, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, that's just something that I think I've always battled with throughout my younger days and definitely my 20s.
And it's really interesting you mentioned that there. So obviously in terms of that ability to put your head down and deliver the results from an education perspective, that takes determination and persistence as well. Did that manifest in that way in terms of those early leadership roles that you had, even though you weren't necessarily offering opinions? The way you led was driven by that?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm definitely much more of a I think there are the different leadership styles, and there's one that's like servant leader. I think that's probably the one where, I'm very much about like, I want to know people's opinions. It's almost more democracy than like it is just do it this way. And some of that I think also does stem from, if I'm going to be honest, like a bit of a confidence thing. When I started my entrepreneurship journey in my kind of mid-20s, and it wasn't all, great things, as a lot of our entrepreneurship journeys are like, there were a lot of failures in there. And because I shoulder so much of the responsibility and so much of the accountability, I always started to boil it down to, well, I'm not making the right decisions that's setting us up for success. And I feel like that has definitely carried, even now I battle with that, where I'm more and more I feel like I second guess myself quite a bit, and I need to actually stop, not stop myself, but like I'm kind of in the process of building that confidence back up a little bit, because even end of last year, I was telling a story at Capsho Live early in January about the fact that late last year I actually suffered a crisis in confidence, and it was just because and this happens, I think it's never something that I found that you suffer from and then you get back from it and then it's like forever you're good again. Like it's a cyclical thing always, because there are just different, what I found is that there are just different ways, and the more that you grow, the more that there are other opportunities there are other reasons that you get, whether it's feedback, whether it's quote unquote failures, whether there's all these things that happen. But because the more that you grow and the more that you experience, the more opportunity there is to do that, which is great because that's just part of being human, which is what I love about this journey that we're on. But the downside to that is that, at these moments when it does take its mental toll to actually realize that, I'm in that space, and then to actually coach myself out of that. So that happened recently, like literally end of last year, I had a crisis in confidence. And, a lot of that was because I think I talked about this quite a bit, actually, like these micro moments. You don't even realize that they happen. It's not anything big, but it's just like where little things happen that you don't realize it's just chipping away. It's just like slight, just like a little chip and little chip here, little chip there, that it gets to the foundation then of like who you think you are. And I think for me, even when I talk about the Capsho journey, I know, Andrew, you alluded to that, there were so many moments, especially last year, where so much of what we were doing and the feedback that we were getting and what we were battling through was just chipping. And it was just like small things here and there, to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've just led us into this complete, like down, not just us as a team, but like you, like all of our Capshovians, like I'm like, how did we get to this point where I feel like what we've built is actually, it's unsustainable. It felt at the time, this is not truth, but it felt at the time like completely unusable. It was like breaking all the time. Like, that was just like the realm that I felt like I was living in. And like, it's those micro moments that for me, when I look back at it and I think about it, it was like, because it was almost like I was breaking promises to myself that I'd made to myself, like, cause I take accountability and response so much where I'm like, oh my gosh, we just got this like, issue, like this issue emailed in. And it's like that, I'm like, we're breaking our promise. Like, we promised, when you start a business, you never promise to not have something that works. You never promise to not fulfill on the thing that, people are paying for. Like, that's just not, and I take that to heart. And I take that I feel that really deeply. And I think it was just all of these things that were stacking up that for me, I like went into a spiral, end of last year. And it was just very much like, okay, no, how do we now like get back from this? And that's what prompted actually the whole rebuild of the Capsho platform. So anyway, I kind of like took us on a bit of a journey, but like, I don't know if that quite answered your question, Andrew.
No, it is.
Happy to, jump off from there.
Yeah, no. And what I really am curious about, something you said there, which I'm sure the audience will be very interested in. When you get these moments and the chipping away, at some point you have to start coaching yourself. And that's an interesting observation. There are some people that have access to a coach who are lucky to have that. And when we don't have access to that, we do have to coach ourselves. But actually, to coach ourselves, we need to create the space to reflect so we can coach ourselves. So just talk to us about how you actually did that and what are the alternatives you have, because I'm really interested about that.
Yeah. Interestingly, we did have a coach at the time. And if I'm going to be honest, like he was great at some things. But in that, when I was going through that moment, he was probably not the most helpful because of his style. He was very much like trying to get us, to be fair, he was trying to get us the results. But like, I think the way that he went about doing it wasn't quite, it was probably contributing, if I'm going to be honest, to, getting into that confidence crisis. And so for me, when I realized that the self-coaching was really about like, okay, well, I have to actually like step out of that. I think for me, I know that I'm in that moment when I just like, I know I'm always hiding from it because I'm like, okay, how do I just fill up my time? How do I fill up my days and my hours and my minutes so that I don't have to think about it? Because my reflex is that I want to like avoid it, right? I'm much more of an avoidant, person around these things. And so, and that's good to know what you're almost like your confrontational, quote unquote, confrontational style is, because for me, because I'm so avoidant, it's like, hey, well, if I start to notice that I'm avoiding something, then there's probably something deeper going on. And then it's like, I talk about being active a lot. For me, it was just going on like really long walks, I just had to get, separate myself even from the physical space that I was in at the time and just like take myself out. And I wouldn't even consciously be like, okay, I need to think through this. A lot of my, like, I rely a lot on my subconscious, if I'm going to be honest, to be like, to know, because I know that I have a problem. I know that if I try to really consciously think about it, I actually end up twisting myself into knots. Because again, if we go back to taking accountability, like, full accountability and responsibility, I'm like, if I cannot, I know for myself that if I go on a walk, for example, a 90-minute walk, and if I don't come back with a solution to the problem, then I get down on myself again, right? Because that's like, I'm very, very solution oriented. So I've kind of gotten into a bit of a mode of like, okay, I'm going to let my subconscious like kind of take this, and so I'm going to park it for now. I'm just going to walk and just not like put any pressure to actually think about the thing that I know is happening in the background. So I might even just listen to an audiobook or a podcast, or, just to like let my mind just kind of like switch off from the things that are happening. And I do find, for some reason, then I'll come back, I'll have a conversation with my co-founders now, and I realize that my subconscious has actually been working in the background and I start to articulate things, maybe not in a very articulate way, by the way, but just I start verbalizing things to be like, oh my gosh, okay, so this, like my mind has actually been thinking about the things that it needed to get to the point of, okay, how do we get ourselves out of this? And when I say ourselves, it's really myself out of this. So I wish that I had like a much more structured, step 1, step 2, step 3 solution to this. But I think we all have to go through this ourselves and figure out what works for us. And that's just what I found worked for me.
Yeah, and what I love about what you said there, you're also trusting the process. There's a great book, I think it's Robert Fritz is the author, The Path of Least Resistance, where he talks about the great creatives, and we all have to be creative as entrepreneurs and leaders as well, do exactly what you're saying. They basically park the conscious and then go and do something where they can be present in nature or in life or in relationship. And then before we know it, the next day it appears. So yeah.
It's there, yeah.
Absolutely. Let's go back. I'm really interested. Richard Branson quoted on LinkedIn, I think it was last week, that he is convinced all human beings are born preneurs. Many of us are intrapreneurs. Many of us are entrepreneurs. So what was it for you that was that catalyst for you to decide to become that entrepreneur, having started corporate life?
Yes. So in my corporate job, essentially, so I studied a combined commerce and law degree in university, and then my first job out of university was in an investment bank. So it's the biggest investment bank actually in Australia, called Macquarie Bank. And I was actually quite fortunate because I was put pretty early on in my career on a really big regulatory project. And it was actually so big that it had visibility all the way up to the CEO level. And so I was in these rooms in these meetings with like, pretty senior people, and which was amazing visibility. But what I found, interestingly enough, was like I'd be witnessing these conversations that were happening, and I'd be witnessing all the back channeling and, everything else that goes on in corporate, especially at those levels. And it made me realize, even really early on, that I was like, I just don't think corporate's for me, because I just don't think I want to have to become that person. And when I mean that person, I mean the one that has to play that game, the corporate game. It just personally wasn't for me. Like, I know that people thrive in that environment, and kudos to them, because I know that I just couldn't do it. And so it was, pretty much in as I said, my mid-20s, when I was like, oh gosh, I just don't think that corporate was going to be my long-term thing. But I didn't really have an idea, like, I wasn't like there tinkering on something else on the side or anything. I just conceptually knew that this wasn't going to be it for me. And then my then boyfriend, now husband, he was actually studying medicine, and he was not enjoying himself. So he was halfway through a med degree, and we just actually moved out together. I love my desserts, and he actually really started like getting into cooking and baking, especially because I love desserts. So he was like just, experimenting with a ton of desserts that I loved. So I was like the taste tester. And there was just like one night, I think we were talking about, what we're mutually doing, me in corporate, him, studying in medicine, and just really not looking forward to having to go into hospital and things like that. And I was eating this dessert. I was like, you know what? Like, this could be an idea that we have. Like, there isn't actually anything that exists where it's a dessert bar that is focused just on bringing freshly baked, really high quality desserts. Like, that's just all we focus on. It's not a restaurant. It's not, it's a dedicated dessert bar. I was like, why don't we explore this idea? And so we did. And it was like completely, we had, you can tell, no experience in entrepreneurship, no experience even in hospitality, which is crazy. We just started that process of finding a location, and then it just one thing led to another and led to another, and it just snowballed from there. And so we opened our first dessert bar in 2013. So the brand itself was called the Choc Pot. And then from there, over the next, 5 to 6 years, we actually expanded that brand to 5 locations. And we also had a burger restaurant as well. So we had 2 locations of that. So it was like just a crazy ride. It almost felt like we fell into it in a way.
Yeah. And what I'm really interested in here now, you're already describing what's happened to you during your career so far, is many entrepreneurs, doesn't matter how many businesses they're involved in, are very effective normally at leading themselves. They have a way of managing and leading themselves to be resourceful in that sense. And then as they scale and get multi-sites, and as you're doing, growing a business, we then have to lead others. So just share with the audience, what have you found most challenging in your career to date about leading others?
Oh my gosh. I think first and foremost, it's not even about the leading others. It's about like finding the right people to lead. I feel like we take that for granted a lot because there's just so many people that want jobs, and, a lot of them are like good, and, but sometimes, there's so many layers of what, quote unquote good means and looks like. Like, yes, they might have the experience and they might be saying all the right things, but are they good from the perspective of like, what it is that you need to complement, yourself or the rest of your team? Like, is it good in terms of like that they can even, receive your leadership style, but that you can also adapt your leadership style? Like, there's so many layers to it. And I think it's just like navigating all of those that I found honestly to be challenging. It's not even like the actual person, if that makes sense. It's just like all of the nuances that go into, even if it's just one person, into leading them. So even if I like take away, employees, it's like even myself and my co-founders, so I have 2 co-founders. There's three of us in the team. And there have been many times where we've had to have really hard chats with each other about like how we receive feedback and communication and how we give it. I like honestly am not good at hiding facial expression, like, my, things that I'm thinking on my face, for example. And sometimes I don't, and especially with the co-founder relationship, because you know each other so well, you actually don't filter a lot of, so I'll just say things almost carelessly without the filter on, like to be like, actually there's another, because it's a different relationship when you're talking about the co-founder versus like business or even romantic, and it's quite different. And so how we might actually interact with each other in like a casual or different sense is actually not the same as how we need to interact with each other in a work sense, because again, we all take pride and responsibility and accountability in our professional. So we have to just be like really mindful of that. And sometimes I do get careless with that. So, even when we talk about challenges, like even just realizing that and then going, oh my gosh, okay, how do I adapt the way that which is not an easy thing to do, because when you're just so used to communicating the way that you do, it's it takes a lot of practice and a lot of reps to just be like, okay, I need to just really know when either my triggers are or know when I'm about to trigger something or someone, and just like stop it there. And that has been a really, really challenging journey. I'm not going to lie. I'm still on it, to be honest. So that's just one aspect, let alone then, the work part of it is, as in the actual, like being on the tools for whatever it is that we're doing, is almost like the simpler part, but it is almost those relationship considerations that you need to, that for me has been personally the most challenging.
And it's very common with a lot of the clients that I work with in terms of that founder group or a leadership team, where there isn't that kind of conflict sometimes that's needed for the commercial tension. And they wonder then why they're stagnating or they're not moving forward. So it sounds as though you have lots of lovely commercial tension anyway.
Yes, I would say that, yes.
Absolutely. Let's move on a little bit to the future, Deirdre. So if we think about the future, the next 5 or 10 years for you, what is it you're going to be in service of?
Yeah, I think right now we're really, really focused just on our Capshovians and the people that we're speaking to. So as I mentioned, entrepreneurs, so coaches, consultants, service providers who want to use content to get leads and more clients. And that's not an easy, because very early on when we started Capsho, it was actually a very different focus. We were very much focused on podcasters first and foremost, and just making their workflow more efficient. And the more that we went through the journey, I mean, efficiency is still a big part of what it is that we do. But, for us, it just wasn't fulfilling unless we're actually helping people get results. Like that is what we are so invested in. And I'm not here saying that that's what we've cracked. We've never, I'm never going to say we cracked the code on it, but like we are so invested in putting the time and effort into just continuously helping our Capshovians do that in however way we can. So that's just honestly over the next, definitely the next few, we talk 5 years, that is 100% going to be our focus. How that looks like and how that shapes out to be, I actually don't know. We have a bit of from a product perspective, we have a bit of a roadmap, but we're also very cognizant of the fact that that roadmap can change depending on, again, if we go, this is the result that we want to help our clients achieve, that will likely change because, the way that that result might happen is probably likely to adapt. So yeah, it's always going to be what is it that our clients need to get results. That's what we're going to be focusing on.
Great. I'm going to be a bit unfair now. I'm going to ask you a question I've never asked, I guess before, but it's just come to me now because it's really interesting. It links to, I guess, your earlier life as well and what it is you've been doing so far into this entrepreneurial journey. But let's say in the next few years, Capsho has been very successful. It's done what it's there to do. And you just feel that it's time for you to go on to the next stage of your adventure in your life. If you had no limitations whatsoever, financial, health, location, what do you think you might spend a lot of the rest of your life doing?
Gosh, honestly, I think I would probably spend a lot of my time just with family. If I'm going to, it sounds a bit cliche, but more and more I realized how important that time is to nurture the relationships around you that are important to you. That is actually what I want to be. Yeah, that's what I want to be focusing on. We're going through, and I don't share this. I guess I did share it on a podcast episode, but where my husband and I are going through going through the IVF process right now. So it's not an easy thing to do, but I can imagine that when, kids come along and things I would want to spend time with them. I want to be able to drop them off school, pick them up, take them to extracurriculars, be involved, not really involved because they'll probably be back off, but, involved to the I want to be there for that, for all of those moments. So yeah, in terms of work, I will always want to keep my mind active. So I'm sure that I'll think of something else to do from a work or professional perspective. But first and foremost, I think it's going to be family.
Yeah, no. And that's very normal when I ask that question of my clients and work with various people. And the reason I ask that question is because particularly with entrepreneurs, whether they're entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs got their own businesses, sometimes we're driven and it looks from the outside that we should put everything into the professional side of our lives. And then suddenly the family side, starts to suffer. And I've met so many people like that. And I'm one of those that have suffered that. So I love the fact that you've said that's so important and we can all learn from that in terms of putting priorities forward.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, by the way, very different. If you had asked me, even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been yeah, I just want to keep working and make this a success. And, it felt like my identity was wrapped up in entrepreneurship and business and things like that. But I think more and more I'm realizing that it's actually not. So yeah, things change as well. So I would just encourage, I'm encouraging, when I say this, I'm encouraging myself, but also everyone else to just be open to being flexible and adaptable. That's all we can do as humans.
Yeah, exactly. Before I let you go, there is one question that's coming to mind that, again, our audience probably would appreciate. You went into entrepreneurship at a young age, professionally in that sense. If there are people out there now, no matter what their age is, and they're in a corporate environment, yet there's something within them that is screaming, there's something you need to go and do out there, and yet there's something that holds us back. What advice would you give to those people to at least maybe explore it a little bit?
Yeah, wow. This is a hard one because we all have different situations. I would say there's something, we're all at different, and especially when we think about financial situation, because that seems to be the biggest thing that will, guide this decision. So I'll never say that this is blanket advice or anything like that, because again, everyone is in a different situation. But I have found So when we started our first business, I was still working full time. And I would say that if I had been courageous and made the decision to just quit and go full time into the business, that business would have done so much better. Like I would say 10 times better. Because it would have had my full dedication and focus on it. And so, if you do have something burning inside of you and you have a great idea that you need to flesh out and test and, all of that, like you're always going to be held back if you let yourself be held back. I think that's the main thing. Now, if you're like, yes, I have this idea and I have this burning passion, but for whatever reason, you're letting yourself be held back in terms of like, oh, but I need to still be working because of X, Y, Z, which is totally valid reasons because you have a family or whatever, you have a lifestyle that you need to maintain. Then if you cannot at some point see yourself fully committing to changing that, I don't know whether entrepreneurship is for you because it takes a lot. Like it is, Andrew, like it is a lot. You go through a lot, not just financially, but like mentally with your relationships. It takes a lot out of you to be an entrepreneurship. And so I'm not encouraging people to not do it. I love being an entrepreneur and I'm so grateful for this journey that I've been on, but I also know that it's not for everyone and it's not an easy journey to be on. So, I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to be really realistic because it's very idealistic to be like, yeah, everyone should just like do it and, start with a side hustle, which you totally can, by the way, but just know that the side hustle will only ever be a side hustle if you continue to let it be. So anyway, that's a really, really long-winded answer and I don't know if it helped anyone because it's really just going to depend on which calling inside of you is bigger. Is it the burning passion to like change your circumstance and do something different, or is it the calling to maintain your current circumstance? That's what's going to come down to.
Well, I really loved hearing your story today, Deidre, and I'm sure our listeners and the people that are watching this on video as well would really want to say that they appreciate everything they've heard. So thank you very much for coming on the show and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.